everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good day to you all. Thank you so much for joining us today on our topic Accelerating EV Adoption for Gig Drivers. My name is Simbiat Yusuf Muller. I am the events manager at Fourth. I have some announcements from the Fourth team before we start, and I will pass it over to our moderator today. We have a great conversation today with the Rideshare Guy, Fourth, Metropolitan Family Services, and the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, discussing and identifying pathways to accelerate EV adoption amongst gig drivers. Attendees, we ask that you submit all of your questions via the attendee chat. We will get through your questions during our Q&A. We will also be sharing a copy of the slides as well as a recording with additional resources from our presenters today. So if you miss any key information or you want us to go back, don't worry, you will have all of the recording and all of the information necessary. And if you are new to our webinar or if you're new to Fourth, we are Fourth. We are on a mission to electrify transportation. We're bringing people together to create solutions to reduce pollution and reduce barriers to access. Our work at Fourth is done in five focus areas, which are access to electric cars, access to emerging modes, access to charging, policy advocacy, and events and partnerships. If you would like to learn more about Fourth and the work we do, any reports or any of our programs, you can find that information on our website at fourthmobility.org. And we wanted to use this opportunity to thank our members and sponsors for giving us the opportunity to continue these webinar programs, as well as some of the programs at Fourth. If you have any questions about membership sponsorship opportunity for the webinars at Fourth, you can reach out to our membership and partnership manager, Rachel Haverkamp. Email is on screen. We just announced the Mobility for All scholarship applications. They are now open. I am so excited to announce this. This Mobility for All scholarship provides a complimentary ticket as well as the travel stipend to individuals from community based organizations looking to access and attend the Roadmap Conference. If you have any questions, would like to apply, or would like to share within your network, we will share that information in the webinar recap notes. You can also find that information on the Roadmap site at roadmapfort.org. Also, it is not too early to register and save your spot for the conference. Please share within your network. So we look forward to having you all in Detroit. For the first time, we're taking the show on the road in Detroit, September 24th to the 26th. We hope you see you all there. And if you have any questions regarding EV charging infrastructure, Fourth has an EV charging infrastructure education platform that has resources on EV charging programs in rural and underserved communities. We are currently offering a 50% discount to attendees of our webinar. You can use the code on screen EVMAR50 to access the 50% off discount. This is an opportunity to get resources on any questions or any questions you might have regarding charging infrastructure or bringing charging infrastructure into your community. And in 2 short days, we'll be hosting our one of two workshops in DC, Design and Fund Equitable Electric Transportation for Communities. If you would like to register for our April 17th in Chicago workshop, you can find that information on our website. We'll make sure to include links to that in the webinar recap notes. This is a full day workshop with reception practices when applying for some key guidance on program designs. And with that, that is all for me, and I'll pass it over to our moderator, Gabe. Gabe, would you like to join me on stage and introduce our speakers?
Hello. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Gabe Ets-Hokin. I am the senior EV writer for the rideshareguy.com. That is a premier platform for gig workers in our new economy. And I also have a blog called evmoney.blog that you're welcome to come and check out. Uh, I have been writing about motorized vehicles for about 20 years now. And in the last 10 years, I've been a specialist in electric vehicles. Um, I want to introduce our panel today and thank everyone for coming. Um, if you can turn on your webcams, Amy, Jarvis, and Ian, I'd like to introduce you to our audience. Amy, you're we can see you're all right. You guys look great. So we have Amy Corbett is here, and she is the Chief Program Officer for Metropolitan Family Service. Amy has been instrumental in designing, managing, and delivering innovative programs that address complex social issues and needs through collaboration and community partnerships. And uh, hello, Amy. How are you?
Good.
And this is
Thank you.
Jarvis Murray. And we have Jarvis Murray. He is the for hire administrator for the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. Jarvis is tasked with developing policy for these industries and is working with stakeholders to develop partnerships, improve technology, and manage the regulatory environment in a way that protects the public. Because both Uber and Lyft and a lot of other these gig work platforms brag about how they move fast and break things. And Jarvis, I guess, is tasked with fixing the things that they break, maybe a little bit, Jarvis. And
That
we also
sounds
have,
about right.
say again. Yep.
Sounds about right.
All right. And then we also have Ian Sargent. Ian is the program manager here at Fourth. Ian focuses on projects related to education and adoption of electric vehicles for TNC drivers. TNC is what the state of California calls Uber and Lyft drivers, taxi cab network companies. His current work is on a national program to create a toolkit that will facilitate the adoption of EVs for low income drivers and earners. So thanks very much, you three, for coming and breaking this all down for us today. Uh, I wanted to ask before we get started, um, Amy, you can start. What's an opportunity that you're excited about regarding electric vehicles for gig drivers?
Yeah, I'm really excited because, we've been helping individuals get vehicles for a while and just thinking about the carbon savings when someone's using their car for work all day long compared to an individual who just, uses their car when they need it is just so much bigger. So this is a new population for us to be targeting. And it's just really exciting to think about the impact that we could make if we can help a lot of gig drivers get into EVs.
All right. Hey, and just because we're a little stressed, a little crunch for time, if Ian and Jarvis, if you want to answer in the chat, that would be great, and we can just move on with Amy to talk about the MFS's Electric Ways to Work program. And if Jarvis and Ian, you could turn off your webcams. So
Great.
all right, thanks, you guys.
Yeah, thanks. So Metropolitan Family Service runs an innovative program called Portland Electric Ways to Work to help accelerate the adoption of clean transportation for lower income Portland residents. Metropolitan Family Service is a multi-service nonprofit agency in Portland, Oregon. Our work focuses on three critical community initiatives. We promote early childhood development and youth success through early learning and community school programs in 24 low-income schools. Community-based health and wellness includes transportation program for older adults and people with disabilities, as well as food pantries and health and activity programming in schools. Our economic well-being work includes free tax preparation through VITA sites, career internship exploration in high schools, financial coaching, and providing auto loans to low and moderate income individuals. We began providing below market rate auto loans through our Ways to Work program in 2005 as part of a national network of programs that helped low income families with challenged credit get a car to get to work and take care of family needs. The national network closed in 2016, but we kept the program going through donations and small grants until we had the opportunity in 2021 to begin retooling our program to promote EVs through Portland General Electric's Drive Change Fund, and in 2022 to transform the program to a sole focus on electric vehicles, plug-in electric hybrids, and e-bikes through the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund. So the Portland Clean Energy Fund, or PCEF as we call it, invests in community-led projects to reduce carbon emissions, create economic opportunities, and help Portland become more resilient as we face changing climate. Climate change has a disproportionate impact on communities of color and people with low incomes, so they are the primary populations for this work. Grant areas include clean energy, workforce development, regenerative agriculture, and innovation. Portland Electric Ways to Work is an innovation project with the goal of lowering carbon emissions in Portland. Through this funding, our staff screens applicants for eligibility, provides financial coaching, and processes auto loans. It also pays for staff who provide comprehensive education to people considering moving to an electric car or bike, and targeted community engagement to help us understand what the community wants to prioritize in response to climate change and what barriers the community may experience in moving to electric transportation. What do they need to make this change? So far, our outreach team has talked to over 700 community members at 13 community events. Eligibility for Portland Electric Ways to Work is shaped by the goals of PCEF. Participants must reside in Portland, be at or below 80% median area income, be at least 18 years old and have steady employment, and have enough disposable income to pay back a loan. All participants engage in initial financial coaching and can access ongoing assistance throughout the life of their loan. So our main goal is to accelerate the adoption of lower carbon emission vehicles for low-income Portlanders, and we do this through giving 8% loans combined with initial and ongoing financial education. To help with affordability, MFS provides down payment incentives ranging from $5,000 for EV loans to a $500 incentive for e-bikes. We also help our participants with the complicated federal rebate process for used EVs and provide comprehensive education to make sure that our borrowers understand the lifestyle changes they may have to make depending on the neighborhood where they live, the battery range of the car they're considering, and where they can charge, especially if they can't charge at their residence. So gig workers are a good demographic match for our work to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles. According to the Plug-in Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Research Center, the average Uber Eats delivery driver makes just over $20 an hour in Portland. The average Uber driver's annual earning is just over $44,000, and a strong majority of gig workers who drive EVs choose them for economic reasons. 63% of rideshare drivers in the U.S. identify as BIPOC, which is the PCEF priority population. The economic benefits of owning an EV for a gig worker can be significant when you compare the cost of renting a vehicle from Uber or Lyft to buying an electric vehicle at a reasonable interest rate using federal rebates and the MFS down payment incentives we can provide. So the weekly cost of vehicle rental is almost as much as a monthly payment on a 50-month loan. And finally, partnerships are really key to a successful auto loan program like Portland Electric Ways to Work. Fourth serves as our electric transportation content partner, providing expert consultation to MFS about electric cars and bikes, policy issues around electrifying transportation, and connection to local and national resources. Our credit union partner processes our loans, does basic collections, and participates in loan approvals. We have a an auto loan, used auto dealer partner that specializes in electric vehicles and helps our staff learn about different options in electric vehicles, what to look for in quality vehicles that fit the different needs of car buyers. And finally, we partner with many local nonprofit service partners who spread the word about our work to their staff and participants. So let's see. Sorry. So I provided my contact information here. If you'd like to learn more, it would really be exciting to us if more opportunities open up in communities across the United States to make electric transportation more affordable and accessible to everyone. Thank you.
Hey. Okay. Well, that was great. Thank you very much, Amy. And then I had a little question. You said the hourly pay for Eats delivery drivers was $20 an hour, you said?
Yeah, that's what I saw. That's what I saw listed when I did a little bit of research, and we know that we've already had a few gig drivers come to us looking for loans, and their incomes were quite low.
Mm-hmm. Is that $20 number? Is that the total time or just their booked time?
I'm not sure about that. That's a good question.
All right, that's a subterfuge that Uber and Lyft use to make people think that we get paid more than we actually do, which you probably know about. All right, well, thanks so much. If you could mute your camera, I would like to turn this over to Ian Sargent. How are you doing, Ian?
Doing great. Thanks, Gabe. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Carry on, sir.
All right. So I'm a program manager at Fourth. As Gabe said, I've been here for a couple of years on Fourth's Access to Cars team. And before I worked here, I started a not-for-profit organization organizing friendship building missions to Cuba and working with community orgs down there. And the nature of that work is seasonal. So in between trips, I drove for ride-hailing apps like Lyft and Uber, and I did delivery, especially during the pandemic. That kind of became my full-time gig, and quickly found that gas and maintenance are extremely expensive. And this is the tool of our trade. The car is how we make our money. So I started looking at options that might bring down those costs. And when I started doing research on EVs, that's how I came across Fourth, the organization. And they basically held my hand through the process of buying an EV through their early fair financing pilot program. And I quickly became a cheerleader for Fourth's work and for EVs used in TNC work. I helped them out a lot over a few months, trying to connect with other drivers. And eventually they invited me to apply for the position I'm in now. So I'm going to go over a brief overview of what I'm going to cover here. I'm going to talk about why it's important to electrify TNC work, some barriers to access, what drivers actually want. We've got some insight on that, and some current programs that address the needs of rideshare drivers. So why is it important to electrify rideshare? Uber and Lyft have transformed America's roadways, and according to Lyft's 2023 Economic Impact Report, there are more than 8 million fewer cars on the road because of rideshare. So addressing the needs of TNC drivers is an important step toward further reducing the carbon footprint of day-to-day transportation. Facilitating the transition of these drivers from gasoline-based vehicles to EV models can obviously have a big impact on air pollution and on global warming. Fortunately, according to another study, we're finding that drivers on Uber and Lyft platforms tend to use efficient hybrid vehicles 6 times more than the average car owner does. But despite that, the carbon footprint overall of gig drivers is of course much higher than that of personal vehicles. And so we want to try and find some solutions to that. People who drive for Uber and Lyft and delivery work use so much gasoline that they are referred to by some organizations as super users of gasoline, significant contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. Also, finally, we need to think about the drivers themselves. Transitioning to EVs can help them out. Even if we look at the huge upfront cost of transitioning to an EV, over the lifetime of ownership of the vehicle, if you consider not just the purchase price, but fuel, maintenance, and the cost to charge an EV, EVs end up costing about half of what internal combustion engines do over the lifetime of the vehicle. So gig drivers can start benefiting financially from driving EVs within the first few years of ownership. But again, that's if they can get past the hurdle of high purchase prices and if they can qualify for loans that aren't predatory. Okay. So we need to talk about barriers to access. Gig drivers overall, if you look at the demographics, disproportionately tend to come from historically marginalized communities. So if we want to be serious about environmental equity, EVs need to be more affordable to people from these communities. And people in poverty often bear the majority of the negative effects of air pollution and climate change. So it is overall an environmental equity issue. The effects of generations of inequity and patterns of poverty with a lot of these communities mean that a disproportionate number of people do not have the same access to higher credit ratings, lower interest rates, and access to loans as people who live in more affluent areas. So as a result, these potential EV drivers who would really benefit the most and have the best impact have the least access to EVs. Gig drivers are also contract workers, so that complicates their ability to qualify their income for loans. Slide. Okay, sorry for that delay. So we were a part of a huge Intermountain West survey. We studied the driving habits and the needs of gig drivers in Phoenix, Las Vegas, Portland, Oregon, and Salt Lake City. And we want to try and figure out the best way to ease people into electric vehicles that has an equitable lens. And we found that drivers overall express the need for long range vehicles. Overall, people believe that they need much more range than they actually do. However, rideshare drivers really do need long range because of the amount of miles they drive per day. Um, I'm seeing a question. I'll go ahead and answer really quick. The Intermountain West study results are going to be released next year. So what we found is that of course, these TNC drivers need access to long-range vehicles, but right now there's currently more than 30 models of cars that have beyond a 300-mile range, and there are a lot more that are going to be released over the next few years. Uh, the car that I drove was a 2020 Chevy Bolt with an EPA-rated range of 259 miles, and that was plenty for what I needed to do. I could take a break in the middle of my shift to charge, stretch, and carry on and continue making money. Drivers also expressed the need for ample charging infrastructure, and of course, with NEVI funding and basic capitalistic demand, there are a lot more charging units available to the general public. It's much easier to drive for TNC now than it ever was before. They also expressed the need for affordable charging and for affordable vehicles, and I'm going to cover that on the next couple of slides. So one way that we can address the need for affordable charging is to consider discounted to free home level 2 charger installation for people who are income dependent. And there are some programs already in existence that look like that. I know of a couple of utilities who are offering discounts for level 2 charger installation. But more importantly, specific to the needs of rideshare drivers, we need discounted fast public charging. So an example of what that could look like is here in Portland. Portland General Electric, PGE, created a deal with Shell Recharge to put up fast chargers in business districts around the Portland area. And people can pay to subscribe $25 a month. And that would give the driver unlimited off-peak charging. And during peak hours, that's between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m., drivers only pay an initiation fee and then 19 cents per kilowatt. So that's definitely created a bridge for people who might not otherwise be able to access electrified transportation. We also have a need for affordable EVs. And there are two ways that can look. One of them, of course, are programs like the federal rebates that now are available as cash on the hood rebates. People can apply those rebates at the dealership as long as the dealership is contracted with the federal government. And that helps. But if we're talking about a $40,000 to $50,000 vehicle, it doesn't go far enough. And so we need local rebates, and of course, the used EV market's going to grow, and that will help. But we need to address barriers to traditional financing. And so there are programs like what Amy was just talking about with Metropolitan Family Service, their Portland Electric Ways to Work program, and that does a lot. And we need more programs like that in the country. We are currently, Fourth is currently in contract negotiations with the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation to create a toolkit that would basically study the needs of different communities across the United States, including tribal communities like Native Son Community Power Development is one of our partners on this. National Consumer Law Center is another partner. And we're working with the Clean Cities Coalitions under the American Lung Association, as well as lending institutions, utilities, municipalities, charging companies. There are a lot of stakeholders involved, and there need to be a lot of conversations in order to figure out what's really going to work best for the greater good. And so, over the next couple of years, we're going to be putting together a toolkit that people will be able to access across the country in order to create programs like Metropolitan Families Services, Portland Electric Ways to Work program. It's an excellent case study. I'm not going to read every single one of these recommendations that's on this slide. I'll leave it up to you. You can also reach out to Amy because they're doing most of the things on this list quite well. But really, education is important. Credit and financial counseling is going to be important if we're talking about equity. The financing piece, of course, is very important. People need to be able to access below market rate loans, especially if they're contract workers. It makes things difficult. And we need to make sure that charging is affordable for the people who are going to be charging a lot to bring our food to our table and to bring us from place to place so that we don't need to drive and put fewer cars on the roads. So hopefully programs like these are going to help with the greater solution. And I hope that a lot of conversations that need to be had are going to happen soon. We're looking forward to being part of the solution. And that's what I've got for you. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That's a hopeful message, I guess, right? Yeah.
I feel pretty hopeful about it.
Make sure we have our attendees. I want to make sure you we'll make sure we get to your answers we'll answer your questions at the Q&A after our next presentation. And Ian, if you could turn off your webcam, we would like to have Jarvis come on back. And we're going to talk about the LADOT's programs encouraging TNC and taxi drivers to adopt EVs.
All right. Thank you, Gabe. My name is Jarvis Murray, and I'm with the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. And as part of my role, as was mentioned earlier, I manage policies and regulations for a whole host of passenger vehicles that operate in LA. In my role, we manage, not just taxi cabs, but also ambulances. We run the scooter program. We run an EV car share program, as well as a bike share program, and a handful of other things that are also under my portfolio. A lot of what I'm going to say, actually, has frankly already been said by Ian. He has a lot of the data um, that he's already discussed, and frankly, it reflects a lot of what I've heard from drivers themselves. I actually just went out and talked to a bunch of people to see how they're looking at things and what works for them. So I think the good news is that this is possible to do. And, I was around when taxi drivers went from Crown Vics to hybrid vehicles, and even at that time, everyone thought that that was going to be an impossible task and an impossible lift. But what ended up happening was, as soon as drivers started realizing that there was a huge cost savings to having a hybrid vehicle, particularly in gas and whatnot, it became a lot easier to make that transition to the point where many taxi vehicles, and I know here in LA, almost all of our vehicles are hybrids, and we actually have that as a requirement, but it's an easy requirement to meet at this stage. But as it relates to EVs, um, you know, that's going to be the challenge. Again, people are understanding the benefit of EVs. My drivers are understanding why it may be good to have one. Many of them cite that they understand that the cost of maintenance could be lower, um, but there are challenges to that. So let me start with what we are trying to do in LA. We actually have a what we call a clean air rebate, and this is funded through a grant from the state, whereby we give them up to $3,000 for bringing in an EV vehicle to use as a taxi cab. And again, keep in mind that in California, local jurisdictions do not have regulatory authority over Uber and Lyft. So we can't impose this on Uber or Lyft or provide these programs for them, but we can provide them for our permitted operators, and that's really our taxi cab companies. So we are able to do this. However, we haven't had too many people take advantage of this. And so what I'm going to go over, and it may seem a little sour, but there are a lot of challenges to this, which I think, frankly, Ian has already pointed out. So uh, one of the first challenges, and one of the biggest challenges, is really the infrastructure and the network. And this comes down to, the number of chargers that are available. There's kind of this thought amongst the drivers I spoke to that, you know, some vehicles have a pretty good infrastructure, meaning like a Tesla, whereas the other vehicles don't seem to have the best infrastructure. And to the extent that we are building a lot of chargers, and we are building a lot of chargers in California, they're oftentimes, going to be too slow for a driver that's on his shift, on his or her shift, or when you see that this location has three chargers available, by the time you get there, there's a line of cars waiting, or you're number 10 in line to use that charger, and that's kind of what I've been hearing about. The other issue is really home charging availability. With the people I talked to, many of them frankly stated that unless you have a home, and frankly it means if you really are a owner of a single family home, then it's possible for you to be able to switch to an EV vehicle. The majority of our drivers don't live in single family homes. Many of them live in apartment complexes or multi-unit dwellings whereby they don't have access to charging. So, I've had drivers get EV vehicles, but have had to park it, down the street, or they knew of a place that charged, that had a charger and kind of in a strip mall area, and they would park it there if they could, if it was available, and leave it there overnight. Um, but it wouldn't be near their home. They'd have to walk, a block or two to that location to do their charging. And I had a driver who brought in a Volkswagen. I think it was an ID4, and initially loved it, but after 3 months, the charging is what became a hassle for that particular person. So that's really part of their issue as well. Like they see the value, they wanna get the vehicles, and, even as I asked about range anxiety, that doesn't seem to be as big of an issue anymore. I'm sure it is still an issue, but it wasn't the thing that was in front of everyone's mind. The biggest thing that I got was, you know, I'm gonna have trouble charging it, and, so it wasn't so much necessarily the range, it was the when I'm running down on range, where do I go? Um, and, again, if you can't charge at home, that was often a challenge. The other piece of that were vehicle costs. So again, some of the drivers I talked to, they mentioned that they thought Tesla had a pretty good charging network, but even a used Tesla is too expensive. It's they're not buying those because the cost burden is too much, and getting a loan for it and all of those things, it's going to be too difficult. Um, Other areas, or other types of vehicles, you can use other types of charging, but the network just isn't there for them. So even though they recognize that the maintenance cost would be cheaper, it's still a challenge again for the infrastructure piece. And then something that one of the other drivers brought up to me was that the cost of charging seems to be going up to them, and they mentioned a per minute charge that they were doing on a vehicle. And when they calculated it in their mind, because many of our drivers are like mathematicians, they're calculating their cost all the time. They can tell you what they're making, how they're making it, how long it will take to make, and so on. And the way that this person calculated, he felt like I'm paying almost as much for gas, or I'm paying almost as much for this charge as I am for gassing up, my Prius. And that, again, that incentive is really a big piece of what gets them going to do this. And so, you know, for me, that kind of triggered this idea, or not an idea, but just kind of a cautionary tale, because taxis at one point a long time ago tried to transition to CNG vehicles. And CNGs were very popular. They offered a lot of incentives. A lot of fleets began using them. But what ended up happening and why CNGs didn't take off are two things. One, the lack of CNG stations that are around, which is essentially like our charging infrastructure. And two, at some point, you know, putting the CNG in your vehicle became the same as putting gas in your vehicle in terms of cost. And so the incentive for having a CNG became less and less and less over time. And so, again, I remember airports even for drivers would offer discounts for being a CNG driver. Um, and so, those are some incentives that could be offered even for airports now. There could be incentives for EV drivers. But again, if the infrastructure doesn't come up, if there's not enough infrastructure, then it may not take off because CNGs didn't really take off. So that's kind of the cautionary tale related to that. And then I'll leave you kind of with this one thing. I was with an Uber driver recently who was leasing his EV. He was leasing a Chevy Bolt. I understand Uber has a partnership with Avis and someone else, and his vehicle, he paid $400 a week for his Bolt. And there was a Tesla that was also available, and it was $600 a week. And he told me with the Bolt at $400 a week, it would take him about 2 to 3 days to make enough money to cover that Bolt, and then the rest of that money was his. Which brought me to this: everything old is new again. Taxi industry used to have a fleet ownership model whereby they would own all the vehicles and the drivers would simply lease those vehicles directly from them at a cost, whether it was daily or weekly. So I was semi surprised that Uber and Lyft has something that's essentially very similar, where you're basically leasing the vehicle out from a fleet company and not having to own it yourself. So the question to me is, will there be a return to that? Because right now everything is still individualized ownership, but I could very much see at some point fleets taking over and saying, "We'll buy the EVs and you'll use them and lease them directly from us." But on a positive note, when I asked that driver, "Well, what do you think of your Bolt? Do you like it?" And he did like it, and it made him think about potentially getting one because it was roomier than he thought it would be. He had some hiccups because when we were in the vehicle, he was like, "I can't tell if it's on." So there does need to be some training on how these vehicles work because he had never used one before. But I do think that there are possibilities. I do think drivers recognize that there are possibilities to these vehicles. And I do think that we can do it, but the infrastructure and the ability to buy them and charge them is going to be the main thing. Thank you all.
Hey, thank you, Jarvis. Thank you. That was great. That was a terrific presentation, and you really hit all the issues that I've seen in the drivers on the Rideshare Guys electric vehicle forum that I manage on Facebook, um, including high purchase price and also um, the high cost of charging, especially in California. Okay. Well, if the attendees, if you we'd love to see your questions in addition to the questions that we already have. And Ian, if you wanna duck back in so we can see your smiling punim. There you are. All right. Looking very dapper today, by the way. We all are, except me, because um, anyway, so let's look at the questions that we have. We have about another 20 minutes to get to some good attendee questions for the panel. Let's just back up. Um, Ryan Ryan Gray wanted to ask Ian regarding the high rate of low income and BIPOC drivers. we know that there's fewer charging stations in these communities where they live, and a lot of folks, and there's several related questions. People live in apartments; they don't have access to charging, and so they lose out on these income-based programs. And how long do you think it's going to take to catch up? And there are laws in California and other states, and I think this is what you're talking about, Ryan, about requiring landlords and HOAs to allow you to install charging infrastructure at your own expense. Um, but how long do you think that kind of disparity is going to take to clear up?
Yeah, well, if history's any measure, it's going to be too long. Is the quick answer, but there definitely needs to be work in legislation to make that happen a lot more quickly. If we're talking specifically about the needs of rideshare drivers, a stopgap solution is going to be installing more DCFCs, more direct current fast chargers in areas where there's a high density of multifamily housing, and it addresses the needs of gig drivers a lot more directly too.
And Jarvis, what about AC charging? I was in Europe last year, and in Paris, you see a lot of outlets that people can plug in their own chargers into, and I don't see that in the United States. Is that something LADOT is looking at?
Honestly, we haven't been looking at that. We've been more focused on kind of building just the charging infrastructure ourselves. So, right now, for instance, I run an EV car share program where we're building the charging infrastructure, but there's so many challenges to actually building that infrastructure, and we're building it on street, so it's public, or public
Mhm.
facing. But again, the challenge is the power draw. Where can you put this in a place? And believe it or not, you know, despite all this, people are still very concerned about parking. When I put in a charger, um, it takes away parking for someone, and so neighborhoods get up in arms about it. And then the other issue I often have with our charging is we often want to put them in under invested communities, but sometimes the challenge in those communities is that we still have a lot of vandalism. So I have some stations that I built and they're there, and I can't keep them online because the wires are always cut. Copper is always being stolen, and so there's some hiccups to some of these things. It doesn't mean we stop trying, but there are definitely hiccups to having a charging infrastructure in cities.
Okay. Amy, is charging infrastructure a concern for MFS?
Yeah, it's a huge concern what we're hearing from the community. People are worried. They do try. A lot of the charging infrastructure isn't maintained well, so people might go to have a charger near where they live, and then it might not always work, so they can't count on it. So what we're hearing from a lot of people coming to us, like they really want a longer range vehicle so that they don't have to worry about charging quite so much. So most people are looking at used Teslas, even though we try to, give them more information about other cars. Like Ian's talking about the Chevy Volt, that's a really good choice. But people want a Tesla because it has a longer range and more charging availability.
Okay. Anna has a question. Um, I I think maybe Ian and Amy would know a lot about this, about EV specific loans with local credit unions, but uh, the departments that are working on this are kind of understaffed. How what is this a challenge? Is this something you're looking at working on, kind of EV specific loans?
I think this might be a great Amy question.
Yeah, I mean, our loans are EV specific, although we do allow hybrids as well, because just really because of what we're hearing from the community that for some people they're just not ready to move to an EV, and we want to accelerate lower carbon usage, and so hybrids are a good option for some people, but um, yeah, it doesn't. It's that I think the loan is the same as a loan for a regular, an ICE vehicle. The issues are more around the cost of the vehicle, and that because we underwrite our loans, we limit people to a $12,000 loan. As a nonprofit, it's hard to, back higher value loans, and the inventory of EVs is just in that price range of 12,000 plus 5,000 plus 4,000 with the federal rebate. It still is $21,000. $21,000 doesn't get you very far. So the price of used EVs needs to come down.
Although I feel like it's been coming down very quickly just this year. The price of are you seeing dropping in the price of used EVs?
Yeah, we are seeing it in Portland. The inventory is going up a little bit in the price, but our customers, our clients are still having a hard time finding a vehicle. Our credit union gives people 60 days to find a vehicle, and then they have to, do a further credit check. And people are having trouble finding a car in 60 days.
Christopher had a question asking how the programs identify people that could qualify for discounted or free home or public charging, and should these, I guess he's talking about loan programs, should they consider income and access to dedicated parking at home, access to workplace charging, or anything else like that? Are those considerations that that these programs for low income drivers? Ian, can you
Yeah,
talk to that?
these programs definitely need to help with that access to charging. A comprehensive program is going to involve a charging component for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Jarvis, I feel like you're more on kind of the infrastructure side than the financing side, or are there
Yeah,
programs that help match up people with funding?
I think there are, but again, my role is really more on the policy for the driver's side. I manage infrastructure for a particular program, but not
Mm. We'll
citywide.
talk about it.
But I believe that there are programs. But one of the things I did want to mention related to the vehicle prices coming down, because someone mentioned about the Teslas, or I think I saw in the chat. It is true because one of the issues I saw was that even as the prices come down, to the extent that there's an accident, which there's always accidents in vehicles, um, you know, if you with the Teslas, the cost of repair is very high, and even if you can afford it, the wait for parts and parts delivery is also a big issue. So your car could be out of commission for months at a time. So that's something that the drivers also echoed to me about some of the issues they face with the EV or with that one in particular.
Yeah. Um, Andrea was excited to learn about your forthcoming toolkit, Ian. But in the meantime, do we have a good recommendation for a kind of clearinghouse, a user-friendly clearinghouse that shows all your finance programs, incentives, financing tools, and other EV-friendly programs state by state?
I believe the EPA might have something up. It's been a while since I've researched it. There are a few clearinghouses that offer that. Amy, do you have anything off the top of your head?
No, no, I don't know of anything like that. I know there are very few, loan kind of nonprofit loan programs like ours in the United States. A few left from the national network that was going on, up until 2016, but not much.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just referring to rebate programs. As far as the financing programs, that just doesn't exist yet. We're gonna have that online in the next couple of years.
I know if you go to the DOT to the website where you can find out efficiency and miles per gallon for different cars that the DOT runs. That there is a kind of a clearinghouse page. It's very complicated because it's the government, so it's kind of hard to figure out all the filters. But it has like thousands and thousands of programs are in there, so it's kind of drinking from a fire hose. Um, uh, Anna wanted to ask all the panelists, how does the shift from the North American charging standard or to the North American charging standard from the CHAdeMO and CCS How is that? Does that going to change the conversation at all? Do you think, or make it easier, or what do you think? Any effect?
I think it'll complicate things a little bit at first, but not by much. We adapt, and especially rideshare drivers, that's what you do. Every turn of a corner, you're adapting to some new information. People will find adapters, and they'll make it work.
And other than a tax write-off, what incentives are there for gig workers renting EVs from Lyft or Uber or one of their partners?
Lyft and Uber both offer incentives for the purchase of EVs. But of course, as was mentioned before, people can also rent EVs from Uber and Lyft and pay an exorbitant amount for it. And it's the insurance that really drives the price up.
Although I did want to mention that both Uber and Lyft do pay additional bonuses for EV drivers. So in Uber's case, it's $1 per ride. Lyft in California, it's $80 for 50 rides. And they're rolling out a program where they pay $150 for I'm sorry, but $100 for doing 50 rides nationwide. So that's the thing that's going to happen. So that if you're an Uber driver and you're paying $400 a week or $350 a week to rent your electric vehicle, if you do 120, 140 rides, that cuts that takes a lot off of that.
Definitely. People can make money renting for sure. But the math works out a lot better if you can buy a used EV.
For sure. And that's where the education comes in, right, on your end. Catherine wanted to know what percentage of the population of California live in, this is a new acronym I learned today, MERBs. What percentage of Californians live in MERBs? Those are multi-unit residential buildings. And are there specific policies or programs in place to address the gap of charging infrastructure in these MERBs? That might be a good question for Jarvis. Like you're kind of very California focused.
Yeah, and I don't know what the statistics are. I can really only tell you from what we have for our drivers, and the vast majority of them do live in multi-unit
Mhm.
dwellings. So, with that being said, there are some incentives for new development coming in to build charging, my understanding. But again, these aren't unit. It's not like even if you have a charging station in your apartment building, it's not like it's a 5-unit apartment building. It's going to
Mhm.
be so many different people, and it's hard to try to covet that space for your personal vehicle. So again, the challenge is that we want everyone to take a chance and get these vehicles, but we really do need to have the infrastructure um, in place, because if you're living in an apartment that has 1,000 other people in it, and even if 20% of you have EVs, that line to get charged is going to be it's going to always be a line, and you're going to end up never really being able to do it. So we do have to figure out a way to make that work.
Yeah, that's that is a definite thing. That charging equation is huge. Although we shouldn't assume that just because people live in a multi-unit building, they have no access to charging. I live in a multi-unit building, and I have access to charging. Um, uh, what percentage of MERBites have access to charging in their home? Does any
You,
whoever had
I
their
don't know
hand up?
that either, but I do know that my drivers who do have EVs that live in multi-unit buildings, I mean, you figure it out is ultimately what they do. Like, and as I mentioned earlier, I had a driver who there was a strip mall about a block or two away from his home that he could park it in, and he had no problem charging there. It just wasn't as convenient.
Yeah.
He'd park it and walk home. So it can be done. But and fortunately for us, again, I do think California is doing a pretty good job of building that infrastructure. He wouldn't do this on shift. This is more when he's at home and he's parked, and he could park at a level two and call it a night. Um, but so it is doable. But the on-shift driving or the on-shift charging is not quite there, I think, yet.
Okay. All right. And we just have time for a couple more questions. Um, Stu wants to know if anyone studied in detail how gig drivers could benefit from from the supercharger, from the Tesla supercharger network being offered, because now they're, over the next few years, they're going to transition to offering it to non-Tesla vehicles. So are there any thoughts on how that will impact this access to on-shift charging?
More charging always helps, but we also need to address affordability.
So no studies about how that's going to change that
No,
reality for
not that I
EV
know.
Uber and Lyft drivers. Um, and then uh, let's see. Oh, Lawrence, this is our last question here. Lawrence wanted to know about the comparative cost of insurance. That's a cost that you didn't talk about, Jarvis. But if Ian or Amy have anything to throw in there, because that is one thing that is thrown up as a obstacle to the adoption of electric vehicles. Oh, they cost so much. Although I know you did address repair costs.
Yeah. So, when I bought my car, there were two things that I was a little surprised by. One of them was that my registration fee was higher, and that's because I'm not paying taxes on gasoline that would normally go towards highway repairs, road repairs, and that's not negligible really when you get down to it. When you think about how much people pay for gas, and then really the insurance went up a little bit, but that's all negligible compared to what I was paying in gas. Oil changes, especially as a rideshare driver, you're changing your oil pretty frequently. Brakes, I've never had to deal with because of regenerative braking. So overall, that there are just fewer parts that can break. And so over the long-term ownership of a car, it's even with paying the extra fees for registration and insurance, it's a drop in the bucket compared to how much I'm saving.
Right. Well, Amy or Jarvis, any thoughts about those insurance costs?
We haven't heard any complaints from our participants who are they have to get insurance before they get their loan, and it hasn't been a big deal to them. That it's a little higher, but nothing huge.
Yeah, I and my personal experience is that a $50,000 car, has is the same to insure as any other $50,000 car. I mean, although I'm sure there's some variance. Okay. All right. Well, I want to pass it on back over to Symbiote. I want to thank all of you, Ian, Amy, and Jarvis, for sharing a lot of great information and great programs that you're working on. And I want to thank everybody for joining. I'm Gabe Ets-Hokin. I posted a link to our Facebook group for EV, Uber, and Lyft drivers. I hope I get to see you over there. And thanks for attending.
Thank you so much, Gabe. Again, thank you, Ian, Amy, and Jarvis. I was going to ask you the question, Gabe.
Oh,
Can you drop the link to the Facebook page? But you did drop it
yeah,
already, so I appreciate
it's there in the
that.
chat. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It was a great conversation that we started off today. Looking forward to the published study, Ian. When that is available, we'll make sure to sign it over to everyone that registered for the webinar today. And I bet the anticipation for that is higher now that you've shared some remarks for us. And to Amy, Jarvis, thank you again so much for presenting on the programs that you all have, making EVs more accessible and accelerating the adoption for electric vehicles to gig drivers. We know that an hour is not enough time to have this discussion, as we say all the time. So we will be following up with a webinar recap email that will have the recording as well as the slides from our presenters. We will also share some additional resources. Thanks to everyone who dropped links for resources in the chat. We'll make sure that those links are included in our webinar recap email. Everyone will be on that. So please feel free to share the resources with your colleagues and everyone. And just in the short time, we have the contact information from our speakers that will also be included in our webinar recap notes. And we do hope you're able to join us in April 9th, specifically on Tuesday, as we continue our webinar series. We'll be discussing increasing community impact with meaningful engagement. That is an engaging, tantalizing conversation that I hope we'll see you all for that. And with that, I want to say thank you for joining us on this Tuesday. We hope to see you in April and have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you.